Welcome to the Scott Home Podcast, back on a pleasant occasion, I would say, to talk about an expected win, but I think still one that we're excited about how stress-free it was over the Sam Houston State Bearkats on Saturday night. Not just football to talk about. We got Cougar sports galore, golf, volleyball, and soccer to talk about, among other things. And of course, our usual look at the Big 12 slate in the coming week and the week that was as well. Dustin, we are for the first time since the early part of this month not talking about a really unpleasant, unhappy loss. How you feel as one of the few and proud who were there in person at TDC Stadium for the win over the Cats of the K? How you feeling after that win?
I'd be feeling better once our beloved third co-host Bobby isn't in the middle of a tornado, which he just came up last second, which is why he's not joining us. So we hope he's doing okay.
Yeah. Mid-interview, you will see later on if you were watching three of us, Bobby, myself, and the person we're interviewing, and then all of a sudden it's two of us. And had to explain to the guy we're interviewing afterwards, no, Jeramey, don't worry. Bobby liked your answers fine. He was just his hotel lost power. So I hope I'm keeping our thoughts with Bobby there. If you want to hear Bobby's thoughts about the game that was, he actually on the free feed, we unlocked it, our instant react to one of the Sam Houston State Bearkats. Bobby had plenty of good thoughts on that one.
But yeah, other than that, doing well. Felt good about the win. It's only one data point. It's only Sam Houston. But Houston played about as well as you could. So excited to be here chatting with you, old school, just you and me style here. So we'll, I know we got kind of a deadline to keep to. So I think let's go ahead and jump into it.
Yeah, I got to mention here at the top, of course, our Patreon, patreon.com/SHPIWCast. Is happy to see some of y'all decide to make the plunge and join after we released the episode to the free feed there. If you are on the fence of doing so, please, for as little as 16 cents a day, you can support what we do at patreon.com/SHPIWCast. Of course, give our network friends, the Ten12 Network, a follow on all social media apps at TN12 Network on Twitter and anywhere else you do social media. And of course, going to mention our good friends, Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, vintage made fresh, as they like to say over there. A great Houston Cougar collection that you can save on, among other many great pro and college collections that Charlie Hustle has over there at charliehustle.com. By using our promo code SHP15 at checkout, that SHP15 promo code will save you 15% off any Charlie Hustle order you may have of great, incredibly comfortable Cougar wearables. I'm about to, in not too long, Dustin, go to a semi-cold climate. I'm excited to break out a Charlie Hustle crew neck there to actually deal with below 60-degree temperatures for the first time in about, I know. It's hard to even conceptualize for the first time in about 6 months. So excited about that. So charliehustle.com, promo code SHP15, support our friends and look good in Cougar gear or any other gear of any team that you'd like. Dustin, let's get to how this game was won by the Cougars by 38-7 score on Saturday night over the Sam Houston State Bearkats. I think we saw really promising things out of the gate in this one that, with the benefit of hindsight, were foreshadowing good stuff for the rest of the game, specifically the fact that on the game's opening possession, the Cougar offense and Donovan Smith really got going early, found Matthew Golden on two of the game's first three completions, and were able to move the ball against the Sam Houston State defense that I think we had no shortage of worries about. Just for the first time this year, looking like a functional offense in the first possession of the game. Was a bit frustrating to come away from that 3rd and goal on the Sam Houston State 1 to a 3rd and 6 to an incomplete pass and having to settle for a field goal, but you did at least see the Cougars move the ball, and I think that portended good things. The Cougar defense did not look so great on their first possession. Extremely well-traveled Sam Houston State starting quarterback Grant Gunnell looked good on his first drive. They also had a trick completion from receiver Noah Smith. Not helping were a couple of very dumb Cougar penalties in this drive. You had a roughing the quarterback personal foul on the Cats' first play by David Uwebu, and a neutral zone infraction that turned a 3rd and long into a 3rd and short. Not to mention a declined pass interference on that trick pass completion. Sam eventually took the lead when, I shit you not, their situational quarterback, Trapper Pennell, came in and ran up the middle on 2nd and goal to give the Cats a 7-3 lead. And I'm not going to lie, that moment felt like a really low point to have the Sam Houston State offense, which hadn't scored in 22 possessions combined against BYU and Air Force, score their first time of asking against the Cougar defense, which thankfully was not a sign of things to come. Great response from the Cougar offense, which got into Bearcat territory on the second play of that drive on a nice thrown catch from Smith to Golden. Really a good job in the whole drive of Smith finding Golden and Joseph Manjack, who with the drive capped off by Parker Jenkins. Dustin, is Bobby joining us?
Is he?
Is that Bobby's theme music? Is Bobby joining the Scott and Holman podcast live in the middle of my Summer of the Sam Houston game? Bobby, is that you?
It is me. I know you guys miss me. I couldn't let you guys record
Live.
without me. Hello,
Oh my
everybody.
God.
It was
The people at home are not now, because we mentioned at the top about your weather predicament. People at home will know, not be worried that you are.
Don't never fear. Bobby is here. All right. So continue, Sam. Whatever you were saying.
Whatever I was saying. Cougars get the lead back for good on a really nice first career touchdown run by Parker Jenkins. Gold star to the offensive line blocking that touchdown as well, especially the center, Jack Freeman. Next day in possession, the Cougars get the Cats behind the sticks, get a 3-and-out. First sack of the season by freshman AJ Holmes. Cougars start with the next drive with a good dump off on first down to Joshua Cobbs, who got some yards in space. Cougars, unfortunately, would stall out in no man's land and could not convert a 4th and 4. Cats go 3-and-out again. And I think the Cougars really set the tone in their running game on this next offensive possession. They opened the drive with 21 carries on 2 yards, 21 yards on 2 carries from Parker Jenkins, including that awesome rugby scrum-like run on the first down run. A quick random aside on this drive, the official score gave Joshua Cobbs reception credit to AJ Holmes, and it appears to still be reflected by the official score. So frustrating for Joshua Cobbs there, but really great, also gritty moment here. Cougars found themselves backed up to a second and very long near midfield off a rare Patrick Paul holding. Smith gets nearly all those yards back on a nice completion on the run to Samuel Brown. Right before that play, right tackle Ruben Unije, let's just say, battled some gastric distress and bravely made it into his 2-point stance and got through the play. 3rd and short shortly after this, Parker Jenkins has the run of the season, I'd say, going 31 yards, getting tackled just short of the Bearcats' end zone before punching on the next play for a second touchdown. Cougars would get a double-digit lead at this point, 17-7, would not relinquish it. Another Bearcat 3-and-out afterwards. That was the possession where you had the big fracas where Sam Houston State got 2 personal fouls. Cougars get the ball back deep in their own territory, though, after a hold. On the return, you got a nice catch and run from Smith to Manjack, got the Cougars back in Sam Houston territory. Cougars would stall out on 3rd and short, the Sam Houston 34. Dana Holgerson makes the curious decision to send out Jack Martin for a 51-yard attempt that goes very wide left, though Martin did have the distance. Still 17-7 at this point. Sam Houston once again goes 3-and-out, gets very backed up in their own territory, but Cougars have another hold on the return. Kind of a theme on the night. Some not so timely penalties in a game that still, fortunately, was not decided by fine margins. Really nice job by Smith, not panicking and effectively escaping pressure in the first completion of this drive to Samuel Brown for a first down. Then on the next play, Brown does a fantastic job on quick action near the line of scrimmage, gets nearly all 23 yards to completion by himself, sets the Cougars up on the goal line, where 2 plays later, Parker Jenkins would run in for his 3rd touchdown of the game and the half, put the Cougars up 24-7. He did miss the opportunity later to add on to that after Sam Houston State bizarrely did not take a knee on their final possession and let the clock run out. Cougars recovered a fumble, but unfortunately just mismanaged the clock at the end there, and Donovan Smith was holding the ball as the clock hit zeros going into the second half. Cats got the ball at the half and did finally get a first down for the first time in multiple quarters, but it was from a running into the punter. Nothing really came of that. Cougars, the last thing I'm going to know about this game, because the rest of this is, second to last thing, I'm going to note a certain backup quarterbacks accomplishments here, but Cougars had a fantastic possession where they got the ball at their own 14, go 15 plays, 86 yards, take just under 9 minutes off the clock. You saw a really nice mix of pass and run, but this was a drive where I think you really saw the Cougar run game suffocate this opponent. Smith and Jenkins both picked up yards whenever the Cougar offense needed it. 3rd and goal, Smith found Matthew Golden on an end zone fade to cap off Golden's best game of 2023 so far, finally getting a passing touchdown for Smith as well. 31-7 Cougs. We'll also note that Uyale came in for the second possession of the fourth quarter on his very first snap behind center, because he did throw a trick play earlier in the second half. Finds Stacey Sneed on a slant over the middle. Sneed goes the rest of the way untouched. Touchdown, 38-7 Cougs, 38-7 Cougs final. I feel like I've asked this question with a lot more of a negative bent the last few weeks, but Dustin, I'm excited to ask you, where would you like to start with Saturday's win?
I mean, there's a lot to like about Saturday's win for sure. And I mean, you mentioned up the top, maybe being one of the few, I thought that the crowd actually filled in pretty nicely. It was more than I expected. I know we were kind of texting beforehand, like, what is the fan ratio going to be if Sam Houston fans are really excited to show up and Houston fans are very much over it. I thought Houston, showed up in pretty good numbers. It was not close. We thought maybe not that it was going to be 1-1, but at least there was going to be enough of a Sam contingent that it wouldn't truly feel like a home game per se. And it was clearly and indisputably a home game because Houston fans, I thought, still showed up in pretty good numbers. So it's rare that we get to it's rare that I've ever been pleasantly surprised by a Houston crowd, but that happened on Saturday. So I want to do shout out the fans who made the decision to still come out and support their guys, whatever, however the season may be going, whatever their thoughts may be about the coach. And then, yeah, I mean, I think in terms of what actually happened on the field, I think the biggest thing is, I mean, Houston played well on both sides of the ball, which just haven't really been a thing, but specifically, it just looks like we had a plan on offense. It looked like the offense was much more doing a good job of getting, some nice, quick, easy reads for Donovan Smith, getting him kind of rolling out and making some decisions, because he's pretty good with his feet. He's, I think, above average when moving with the ball. He can move out and roll out well. Got him some nice, quick, easy dump offs. Got some more runs that felt like they were getting a little more creative and getting the ball to the outside instead of just, trying to run between the tackles. And even when we did run between the tackles, we had more success, busting open the holes for Parker Jenkins. And certainly we'll talk about him. And, thought he had a fantastic game, but I thought it was also by far our best run blocking game that we've seen from this offensive line against a team that, like we said, has done pretty good their first two games in terms of playing run defense. So liked what we saw from Parker Jenkins, liked what we saw from the offensive line, liked what we saw from the game plan around Donovan Smith and his execution of it. Thought the receivers pretty much played well with the occasional drop here or there, whatever. And then UCLA comes in and immediately has a big moment. So, I know Bobby said we were going to get into the 40s, and I feel like we didn't quite get there because we ended up at 38. But I feel like
we make a 51-yarder. Is that too much to ask to make a 51-yard field goal?
I was going to say the spirit of it. I feel like the spirit of it still hit, because essentially what you were saying, Bobby, was that Houston was going to look really successful moving and scoring the ball, even against a defense that had played well. That's exactly what they did. Houston, I think, could have, if they had really wanted to, gotten into the 40s if maybe Sam Houston had scored a little bit more. Maybe Houston's a little more motivated to keep the pedal down, and then Houston maybe does get into the 40s. But really, really impressed. Again, it's only one data point, but I'm not gonna completely change everything I think about the program until I see us do it against a better team. But in terms of a one game data point, I don't think you can ask for much more from the offense than what we saw, and frankly from the team than what we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, I think I made mention of this on the Instant React pod, is the offense just looked different. I'm not, a super big X's and O guy who can talk about all the personnels and all this different stuff. It just looked like everything we kind of asked for last week, right? We said, here's what we want. We want, you can still innovate and do some air raid type style throws and things like that without running the clock super fast. You can take the play clock down, and we did that a couple of times. The last touchdown that Uwe threw, right? That's got air raid written all over it. Quick slant, hit it, go. Get the ball in the hand of your playmakers and watch them go. And that's what we did on Saturday. And so that was very exciting to see. It was everything that Dana Holgorsen has basically said he wants the offense to be since he got here. Close to 50-50. Granted, it was kind of a blowout, right? Close to 50-50. Your quarterback gets 294. It was pretty much everything that he said it was going to be over the last 5 years. We finally saw it. Now, we could talk about the fact that it's taken 4 years and 4 games 4 years and 4 games to see what this offense he has this design of. But again, it's one data point. Can I see it against better teams? Can I see it against better competition overall, right? Can you do it week in, week out? Do I think that this game suddenly saves his job and now we're going to win the Big 12? No, right? But I think I was texting Sam this game gave you, while it didn't make you feel warm and fuzzy necessarily, it did make you feel like maybe this team can compete with some other teams, right? It really made you feel like, oh, I could see this team competing against Baylor. I could see this team competing against Cincy and all these other teams, right? This team can play with West Virginia. Heck, we're going to talk about this game coming up. This team can compete against a team like Tech, especially with their backup quarterback, right? So as you see this offense, you start to think, oh, okay. And you start thinking, okay, this is something that we're finally going to, we can see develop and start working. And as far as the defense, I know I'm not the only one as a Cougar fan who on that first drive, they go down and just absolutely just score their first touchdown in FBS and just kind of made it look easy doing it. It definitely didn't instill a lot of confidence, but to hold them to 7 after you do that, it's what you expected. That's what I take that back. Maybe it's not what you expected, but it's what you hoped to see. How about that?
I was going to say, yeah, I agree with everything Dustin said. It really felt like the offense was giving Smith more stuff in the 5 to 11 yard range and rolling him out, like playing to his strengths, kind of like what we talked about. Just there is a good quarterback there. There's a guy who has specific strengths, play to them. And I think obviously acknowledging what you could do against Sam Houston is different than what you can probably do against most of the Big 12 opponents you see this year. It seemed like regardless of the opponent, they did stuff that played to his strengths, and having the run game be as effective as it did, I think was a big part of that. I mean, I don't want to overdo it, but even when this offense has had its good moments the past couple of years, it's very much been in spite of the run game, not because like Alton McCaskill, good freshman season, not taking an iota away from that, but that was like, oh yeah, Alton McCaskill is pretty good, but I don't think if you really press me, I don't think the 2021 team was that good at running the football. Alton McCaskill was, but it still didn't always translate. And back to Jenkins, like he comes in here as a 4-star recruit and a guy with a reputation of speed. So I don't think seeing him out there as a true freshman, doing things like returning kicks and maybe even being in the rotation, that's not surprising, especially with Holgorsen and his position coach, Mike Jinks's preseason comments about him. But seeing how physically ready Jenkins looks for the D1 game and how effective he was Saturday night as a north-south runner, it's a sight for sore eyes, man. I think we definitely saw flashes of it from McCaskill, but even when McCaskill was doing well, it was, again, it almost was in spite of the run blocking in front of him rather than, hey, like Parker Jenkins is doing a good job, but he's also getting good holes to run through. Like Donovan Smith's doing a good job, but he also, to the pass game, has an offensive line that's giving him time to think and find it and do all the things that he wasn't able to do maybe the first few games of the season. So, I mean, you share the credit for what Smith and Jenkins do with the Cougar offensive line, which I think did a great job supporting both those guys. And this was a 38-point performance in a game with at least a quarter of garbage time and where the Cougs turned 2 Sam Houston State turnovers on their side of the field into 0 points. And you had 2 possessions in Sam Houston State territory and in turnovers on down. So I'm saying that because that tells you that this wasn't the Cougars playing a perfect game on Saturday. This wasn't the stars aligning. This was a 38-point performance where you did a lot of things well offensively, but you still have points in the field. Like you still, I think, you play a perfect game, like you're dropping 60 on Sam Houston, which I think, again, it's Sam Houston, so I'm not going to get carried away with it, but it's still a Division I FBS opponent that I think their defense was really stressing us a lot in the lead up to this game. I think if it closed around a 15-16 point spread, you nearly doubled that. Like that's significant. Is it significant enough to say, oh, this team's now a Big 12 contender? No, of course not. But I think you can't just say, oh, well, it's Sam Houston. This wasn't a like 23-10 kind of grinded out, very ugly game. Like I think, don't want to speak for you, Dustin, but I think that was kind of the game you and I were expecting. And Bobby was just like in the face of all evidence, like, no, I think the Cougars correctly, by the way, Bobby, I think the Cougars are going to actually have a good offensive game. So I think I said on the React pod, I don't want to not give the defense credit because last year we saw not very good offenses like Temple, South Florida, and Tulsa really carve up the Cougar defense. So I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. And I mean, it wasn't 7 points where you got lucky. You had one bad first drive, and then Sam Houston did basically nothing for the rest of the game.
It wasn't like they were fumbling the ball and throwing interceptions and doing all this kind of stuff. Like it was, like you said, it was really good overall.
Level of dominance you need to show against a team like Sam Houston is projected to be one of the worst offenses in Division I FBS. Again, not gonna say I was never worried about the outcome of the game early after the Cats scored that opening touchdown, but at a certain point in the first half, it became obvious, like, oh yeah, like these guys aren't moving the ball. Like there's nothing these guys can do in their base offense that is going to consistently get the ball down the field against the Cougars. Want to note also multiple forced turnovers again, which I think has been a really strong positive for this defense. So, yeah, I don't really have much else on this. I mean, after seeing what Sam Houston did defensively in week 1 against another Big 12 newcomer in BYU and having only 1 week to prep for Air Force and holding them to 14 at NRG in their week 2 game. I don't know, guys. I was ready for Saturday night to be a really stressful, unpleasant football game, and only speak for myself here, but I think all of us that watched that game basically spent the last 2.5 quarters just waiting on how much of a win this would be as opposed to any kind of alternative there. Again, no idea whether this game will be any kind of indicator of a turning point in the season, but just we'll gladly take a week where we don't come back mad about Cougar football. Got to cherish those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's going to take maybe a couple more games for Sam Houston to play before we kind of really know how good they are. Defensively, I think we know that they're pretty crap offensively, which is why I'm not taking a whole lot away from this game in terms of the Cougar defense. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they, after the opening touchdown, essentially just sat on them. But again, that's kind of what you're supposed to do right there. They were pretty. Again, they might be the worst offensive team in FBS football. So based on what we've seen through 3 games, so that's a team you sure hope that you can kind of sit on them. But yeah, I mean, if for the next 2 or 3 weeks, all of a sudden Sam is continuing to hold teams under 20, and then you go, oh wow, no, that was a really good offensive performance. Whereas maybe if all of a sudden, I think they're playing like Jacksonville State, if they drop 35 on them, maybe you go, oh, okay, maybe they had a couple kind of a fluky couple weeks. Maybe BYU and Air Force aren't as good offensively as we thought or whatever.
Right.
But either way, I mean, I think even if I think worst case, Sam Houston is probably mid-lower tier in terms of the rest defenses Houston is going to face the rest of the year, and they looked really good in this game. So, ultimately, like I said, good data point, but you didn't bring Dana here to beat Sam Houston. That's kind of supposed to be a given, which you didn't feel like, but you got it. But, we brought Dana here to win Big 12 games. And kind of like you said, Bobby, I think that there's, based on the way that the rest of the Big 12 has played, I would say 5 of Houston's 8 remaining games feel winnable. Not that Houston's going to go 5-3. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they're going to go 4-4. But I think that there's 4 or 5 games left in the schedule that, at least as I'm standing right here on September 26th, you go, yeah, it doesn't feel ridiculous to think that Houston might win that game. And so, suddenly it's a data point that I think it makes you look at the rest of the year and go, okay, maybe the Big 12 slate is not going to be quite as arduous as it looks like, the last couple of weeks.
Yep. Maybe we got three of these Big 12 wins in us. Come on, Cougar football. Let's get that over 4.5. All right, fellas, you want to do forward reviews?
Let's do it.
So naturally, a lot of you guys were pretty stoked about Parker Jenkins' performance. Our friend Bill had Parker Jenkins : offensive identity. Eduardo had Parker Jenkins is him. I tried to yell it because he had an exclamation point at the end, but I always want to respect punctuation. TGB had the Parker Jenkins show. Steven had Parker Jenkins season changer. Steven, I certainly hope so. And Sam, not me, had Parker is the truth, though I do co-sign that sentiment for my fellow Sam. And just a couple other ones. A definite surprise from some of y'all about the offensive explosion that we saw at TDC Stadium. Jacob had, wait, scoring is allowed? And Rodney had offensive mind arrives, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny. My very first thing on forward reviews is a section of Parker Jenkins ones led off by Bills. So thanks for stealing my thunder there. Roland also a little bit surprised by the offense. There's the offense. Jay, like most of us, was excited to see the Cougars playing well. Had very refreshing to see. The boisterous Acadian had mercifully a solid win. And
Great name.
Yeah. At first I thought it was boisterous, and I wrote it in as boisterous, and I looked, no, it's boisterious. It's like boisterous. And
that's the Dustin difference. I think Bobby and I would just saw it like, it's boisterous. It's close enough.
Like, oh God, there's an extra eye in there. And Jordan, I think, correctly noting the team needed that.
So I got 2. Number 1 is from Phi Slam a Coug, who said it's about damn time. And then Amir, you guys probably saw this one and knew I was gonna say it. Bobby was finally right. So
I don't know where that finally comes from.
Me neither, because I thought I've done pretty well.
Backhanded dig there.
Yeah.
I thought I've done fairly well.
Finally right, Bobby.
Yeah. It's taken me 4 games, which mirrors our university. So did I say that out loud? Sorry. So those are my 2 that you guys didn't already steal. So I'm not just gonna repeat what you guys said. So let's go.
I have a few more, a couple Uyale ones. C. Schmidt had Uyale for president. I think he's got like 15, 16 years until that, but I appreciate the enthusiasm just the same. Certainly can't do a worse job.
Never too early to start campaigning.
Yeah, never too early to start campaigning. Uyale for president 2040, I believe. Won't do the math on that. Who's House Nation had Uyale the savior. Jimmy had embrace the puke play. And JP had good but not convinced, which understand.
Okay, that's fair.
That's fair.
On a similar vein, I had the only 2 last ones we're going to do were that one, and then also Chris had now do it again. Again, great to do it against Sam Houston. Go do it in Big 12 play.
Yep. Speaking of Big 12 play,
Speaking of Big 12,
Ooh, look
let's
at
talk about
the kings of transitions here. Look at
the
this.
Big 12 week that was, which started with a couple of non-conference games, including Cincinnati falling to Oklahoma 20-6 in the 11 o'clock slate. Just frustrating game for the Bearcats. They got inside Oklahoma's 25-yard line 4 times. The results of those 4 drives: field goal, missed field goal, interception, turnover on downs. And it's the same thing that killed them last week against Miami of Ohio too. It's just, not that they couldn't move the ball at all, but that once they got close to the end zone, that they just kind of stalled out and couldn't finish it off. So, team total yards in this one, Oklahoma had an edge, but it wasn't a very big one. Both teams had the same number of first downs. If you see 20-6 and think maybe Oklahoma just totally sat on them, that really wasn't the case. This one felt like it was up for grabs most of the way. Cincinnati just never was really able to break through and get those 1 or 2 big plays that they needed, finish off those 1 or 2 of those drives that they needed to win this one. And then, looking at the ongoing, Ken Emory Jones actually passed well enough to be a good Big 12 quarterback. Another, data point, maybe not so much. 22 of 41 for just 235 yards with 2 picks. Not great.
I'm shaking my invisible 8 ball and be like, signs point to no on that. I had this stat actually in the week 5 look ahead, but I think it actually works better here. Cincinnati in their last 7 quarters and an overtime period has 1 touchdown. Like not great. And again, I know Oklahoma, like 4 of those against Oklahoma, a team that by all accounts looks to have a very good defense this year, has a head coach whose reputation his entire career has just been his unbelievable defensive mind. But man, like, so, what 3 of those quarters in an overtime period were against Miami, Ohio. So yeah, now looking great for the Bearcats with the C.
All right. Also on the 11 o'clock, we had TCU beating SMU. Did we not, Bobby?
And another one, by the way, Bobby got right. Like, we talked about this one on the side, and I was just like, yeah, SMU's gonna make a game of it. SMU, like, they're gonna be fired up about this being the last Iron Skillet. And Bobby's like, no, I think TCU's going comfortably. So,
and it's not the last one. We have next year's Iron Skillet. It's scheduled. It isn't scheduled past 2025. I thought it was the last year too, but everyone's been running that it isn't scheduled beyond 2025, which totally I missed that one. I thought it was the end of this year too. Yeah, TCU came out and just pretty much put it on them. SMU got the first field goal, right? They started the game with the field goal. TCU goes down, scores a touchdown, and it's all downhill from there for SMU. It never was really close. Like Sam said, kind of expected this game. Maybe you could see it being closer with the extra juice going on. With it's always a rivalry game, all of that, and it just wasn't, man. I think this TCU team is better than people thought after that week one game. They are really starting to come into their own offensively. This game, they threw for 265, ran for just under 200, 192. So yeah, like I said, really feels like their quarterback, Chandler Morris, is really starting to get his feet under him. I think he had, I didn't write this down, but I think he had 3 touchdowns. Yeah, he had 3 touchdowns on the game, QBR of 90. That's pretty good. So his big issue early in the season was turnovers, and it looks like he might have gotten that right against us a little bit. And it's going to keep. I think TCU is going to start hitting their stride right about now. They turned to SMU over. They made Preston Stone, who's had a pretty good year so far, go 16 of 35 with 2 interceptions. They got run on a lot, right? SMU still ran the ball 39 times for 158, and 2 touchdowns. But, when you hold the quarterback to 2 interceptions, it all kind of comes out in the wash. So, like Sam said, he thought that line, it opened at what, 12, Sam?
No, it opened at like 6.5, 7. And
and you were like, that feels like it's going to be closer. And I was just like, it just feels like TCU is just better and SMU is going to come out really fired up, but so is TCU. So that was kind of my takeaway from the game, is that SMU is probably going to be better than they might have looked in week 1.
Yeah, next up we had Kansas beating BYU 38-27. The Cougars' first offensive possession of both halves ended up in a Kansas defensive touchdown. First, Kobe Bryant fumble return and TD after Bryant himself delivered the punishing hit to knock the ball loose, and then a Kenny Logan Jr. pick 6 in the second half. And partly because of that, the Jayhawks only ran 55 offensive plays in this one, didn't have the ball a whole lot, but when they had it, they ran it well. Jalen Daniels threw only 19 passes, but completed 14 of them for 3 touchdowns. And, if you're a Jayhawk fan, this is pretty much what you wanted from this game. They looked good, I think pretty good offensively after a decidedly middling week last week. Defense wasn't perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but it was opportunistic and plenty good enough. If you score 2 defensive touchdowns, you're allowed to give up 3 and still get a very high grade for the game. So I think the Jayhawks have to be happy with this one.
Yeah, for BYU,
Yep.
Keaton Slovis had his best game passing the ball with the BYU program, 357 yards, 2 touchdowns, but also threw 2 picks, including the critical Kenny Logan pick 6 that Dustin mentioned. This will get a lot of my attention in the 2:30 time slot, not just because BYU is a team I try to follow when I have a chance to do so, but it was basically that game in Rice USF if you wanted exciting football at the latter stages of the 2:30 time slot. So I thought it was a very interesting one. I think one closer than the double-digit final score might lead you to believe, BYU led this one at certain points. It's a game that kind of feels like if it was played in Provo, it would have been the mirror result. Like, I think 2 closely matched teams, and I think Kansas's first 4-0 start in over 100 years of football, and they told
first time having 2 consecutive 4-0 starts, because they were 5-0 last year.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Because they got game day when they were 4-0 or 3-0 or something like that early last season. Someone told Lance Leipold that stat at a press conference, and he was just like, "Well, I'm glad I didn't know that one when I decided to take the job." It was a very funny, dry response to it.
And the next up, West Virginia came on top against Texas Tech. Sam, that one's all you.
A game so ugly only a mother could love it, but I don't think any of the various Mountaineer stakeholders are going to be too concerned about style points right now. Getting the win here. Tech lost their starting quarterback Tyler Shuck early in this one. Unfortunately, sounds like he'll miss most of the rest of the regular season with a broken fibula, and it sucks to see that happen to a guy who missed significant time, hurt the last 2 seasons, and looked really effective in the tail end of last year for Joey McGuire running an offense. His backup Baron Morton, who had some starting experience last season, really struggled, only completed 13 of his 37 passes. Despite all that, Texas Tech did have a chance to tie it, or even if they got a 2-pointer, win this late, but just it really kind of baffling decisions. I think, not to spoil it, but our guest is going to talk about this at least in passing, but throwing the ball 4 times when your quarterback's barely completing a third of his passes, and you have Taj Brooks doing as well as he did, I'm sure just made Red Raider fans absolutely lose their mind. And the Red Raiders actually ran the ball well at times in this one, but just struggled to turn that into anything meaningful close to the Mountaineers end zone. Quick aside, it's kind of wild to me that 2 schools in Texas Tech and West Virginia that have this level of like recent offensive history, Pat Mahomes and Cliff Kingsbury, Texas Tech, obviously the Leach air raid before that. And at West Virginia, Holgo's better air raid teams not too long ago. And obviously Rich Rodriguez prior to that. These 2 schools with great recent offensive history were responsible for this absolute ass ugly offensive game where neither team scored a touchdown in the second or third quarters entirely. So that'll tell you how this one went, but I don't think West Virginia will be quibbling with style points after this one.
A game that we didn't probably expect to have any style points, but was actually maybe a little bit nicer of a game than we thought at least, was Iowa State beating Oklahoma State 34-27. Cyclones were up 14 with under 3 minutes to go in this one. Cowboys got a touchdown to pull within 7. Iowa State had a pretty ugly executed offensive drive to give the Cowboys the ball back with a chance to tie. But Oklahoma State got to midfield, and then Alan Bowman throws the game-ending interception. And quarterback play was a big storyline in this one. For Iowa State, you finally saw proof of concept with redshirt freshman Rocco Becht at quarterback. In previous games, it's been like, okay, he had like a couple of drives, maybe 2 or 3 at most, that he looks like all right. And then all of a sudden, he had a no qualms about it, out-and-out, really good game, basically from start to finish. Finished up 27 of 38, 348 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, no sacks taken. Iowa State can't run the ball worth a damn this year, so they're going to have to ask Becht to do way too much for a freshman, I think. But I think this was the first game where it felt like the staff realized, hey, we can't run the ball worth a damn, so let's not even really try. It's better if you have a first down to give your freshman quarterback 3 tries to do something than it is to run the ball twice into the line and then give your freshman quarterback 1 shot at 3rd and long. So it seemed like going a little pass heavy worked for them. I think we might see more of that. And, I know Oklahoma State isn't anything special defensively, but I mean, this is the first any kind of spark that you've seen from this Iowa State offense this year. So I think that they're going to have to see how much they can ride Rocco Becht. And then for Oklahoma State, they finally abandoned the 3 quarterback system. Alan Bowman was actually the only quarterback that the Cowboys played in this one after playing 3 quarterbacks in all of their previous games this year. And the Cowboys ran the ball way better than the Cyclones did, but they lost because, 12th year senior Alan Bowman was much, much worse than redshirt freshman Rocco Becht. He completed less than half of his passes, unless you count the 2 passes that he completed to Iowa State players, in which case that actually gets him just over 50%, but still a pretty lousy game. And I mean, it goes back to, what we talked about preseason is like, man, this Oklahoma State, for again, you want to talk about recent offenses that, have done some incredible things, but don't look so great this year. It's kind of hard to fathom that Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy are running out there with no one better at quarterback than Alan Bowman.
I just want to add, and I'm not going to belabor the point with it this season, but why couldn't we get that version of Alan Bowman when you and I drove to see us play Texas Tech instead of the one that threw for approximately 9 million yards against our defense that day?
I'd like to believe this is the last time we're going to reference that game on the podcast, but I know that's not true. Next up, we had Baylor falling to UT Austin in a game that was not particularly close, Bobby.
Yeah, in a very nice, as you said earlier, non-conference game. This one was not close. I said that if Baylor was going to keep this game close, that they were going to need to come out and score, get a stop, and then score again, and maybe surprise Texas in that way. And if you look at the drive chart, they got the ball first, like I said they needed to. They ran 3 plays and picked up negative 15 yards, and it took 2 minutes off the clock. So if you are trying to get out early and keep your fans very much into the game with their momentum and get it excited, nothing like going 3 yards, sack for -8, sack for -5, false start penalty, punt it away. Then you get the stop against Texas you need, and then you go 6 plays for 5 yards. So through their first 2 drives, Baylor ran 9 plays for -10 yards. Not going to beat the number 3 team in the nation with that. And then Texas comes down, goes 2 plays, 55 yards, and that'll do it, folks. 38-6. If you are Baylor, you have to be concerned right now. Just kind of, I try to avoid Baylor message boards and Baylor Twitter as much as possible, but something I didn't think I'd see is some people really upset with Aranda right now and how this team looks. And not everyone is calling for his head, but there are definitely some grumblings going on of like, oh, what does this look like? Are we really happy with this? You look at the stats and it's just ugly. Sawyer Robinson goes 20 of 35 with an interception. RJ Martinez goes 9 of 18. It's just, they had 31 carries for 60 yards. If you're Baylor, just downright ugly. 1-3 after this game, and it's not going to get any easier for Baylor. And from a UH perspective, this really is a game that maybe you didn't think you were going to even be that competitive in. And now heading into it, you're going, okay, if we play one of our better games and they play how they did against Texas, maybe we come away with a win in this one. So, yeah, very, very, very disappointing if you're a Baylor Bear fan.
Just gonna point out that almost certainly give you 3 of 4 seasons Aranda's there and has a losing record. I realize there's 8 games left in the season, but I mean, come on, look at this team. They're terrible.
Yep.
Finally, game of interest to both of you guys. UCF lost to Kansas State, meaning that all 4 new Big 12 teams lost their other Big 12 openers.
Yeah, I got whiplash from how quick this one went from, UCF's leading about midway through the third quarter to K-State is up 3 scores and this game is now garbage time. Yep. And UCF actually led at the end of the first quarter and halftime. But I mean, you watch this one, it never really felt like UCF was the better team. Especially with their backup quarterback, Timmy McClain. It's kind of wild to me that Gus Malzahn literally wrote the book on their hurry up, no huddle offense. And UCF had some of the most deliberate possessions that I've seen this year trailing the Cats. And I get why. Like you're trying not to send your defense back out there super quickly against a K-State offense that's very deliberate and is just going to slowly try to grind you into powder. Mm-hmm. But it just, again, kind of a funny thing, like how we talk about Dana is no longer an air raid guy. Like Gus Malzahn definitely is not a hurry up, no huddle guy anymore. I thought UCF's fill-in starting quarterback McClain looked as good as you could fairly expect in the circumstances. The Wildcats defense, their credit, kept McClain from really, I think, affecting the game positively with his legs. I think for all the passing yards he had, I thought that tilted very much to the end of the game and some garbage time in there. And I mean, I can't believe I've gotten to this point without mentioning DJ Giddens' 30 carry, 207 yard rushing performance. I'm not going to compare him to Deuce Vaughn yet, but I mean, Giddens looks very ready to be the bell cow back in this offense. I thought Will Howard, their quarterback, didn't have an amazing game passing the ball, but did a good job affecting the game positively with his legs as well.
Yeah, and from a UCF side, when we spoke to our friends on the TCU podcast, what did he say? The biggest thing in adjustment was it's going to be the depth, and you could see that happen in this game. I mean, like Sam said, this game was close. It was close, and the next thing you know, it's a 3-possession game, and K-State is grinding out a win against UCF. They just look like they had more depth, and that they were able to just kind of wear, like Sam said. I'm just going to echo a lot of what he said. Is K-State has that deliberate offense that just takes body shots and wears you down. And if you don't have that Big 12 depth, which it is kind of shown in all 4 of newcomer games, that it's just going to grind you down, and it's going to take some time to get there.
All right, and we're going to be running short on time, so I think we'll go ahead and skip the non-Big 12 portion of Saturday, other than to say it was a bad Saturday to be a controversial coach with the initials DS. Finally, that'll move us on to Cougar Football playing Texas Tech on Saturday, and the interview that y'all were lucky enough to do with our friend Jeramey from Tortillas and Takes.
God.
We're excited to be joined tonight by our good friend Jeramey, co-host of our Ten12 Network Friends podcast, the Tortillas and Takes podcast, talking all things Texas Tech over there. Jeramey, thank you for taking a little bit of time to join us tonight.
What's up, guys? Happy to be talking college sports.
Yeah, if there's anything our fan bases have been this month, it's been excited about the football season, just cherishing every little moment of 2023 and what it's had in store for all of us, Cougars and Red Raider fans alike. So going to start here by zooming out. Obviously, when you tell you Texas Tech came into the year with pretty high expectations, had a really good first year under Joey McGuire, and now staring at a 1-3 record to open the season. So I would ask you, which problems that have caused this slow start, in your opinion, are fixable, and which of these problems are terminal, at least for the current season as it relates to the Red Raiders 1-3 start?
Man, that's such a great question, because every week I think that we've figured out the problem and we can adjust. We find a new problem. And so that's the most frustrating thing after, like you said, a really good season last year where you do things that you haven't done as a program since 2008. And that's kind of like for Texas Tech fans, this euphoric year that we just love to kind of pin back and be like, this was the golden age of Texas Tech. So kind of hearken this reckoning of, okay, now as the Big 12 is changing, Texas Tech can kind of take this prime step forward and challenge for the Big 12 this year. And of course, we've had kind of a rough start to that. And the terrible thing is that it's not without winning the Big 12 is not statistically impossible at this point, because we're only 1 game in, but there's no freaking way. So now we're just kind of reeling back wondering what the hell happened. And I think, if we want to go to fixable issues, I think the fixable issue is the main issue overall, which is just our game management and our offensive play style. Something last year, going into this whole new era of coaches for Texas Tech, we brought in Zach Kitley from Western Kentucky, formerly at Houston Baptist, brought his dude Bailey Zappi. And they ended up putting near 6,000 yards up through the air in a season. And Bailey Zappi goes on to go to the NFL and having a lucrative enough career there. And so we bring on Zach Kitley, who's son of Wes Kitley, who's a Texas Tech track and field coach legend, still coaching. And so it was kind of this nice, heartfelt, let's bring the whole family together, Red Raiders. We love to have Red Raiders coaching Red Raiders. And we were just kind of worried about what his pedagogy would be when it comes to running and passing, because we have good running backs, and Kitley really hadn't had good running backs in the past. And last year it was a slow, bumpy start, but towards the end of the year, we started utilizing the run game a lot more, and you saw Texas Tech started to win those close games, win those 1-possession games. And so, especially with that Ole Miss game, which was not a 1-possession game, felt really good. Finishing the bowl game the way that we did, it kind of felt like a really nice launching point for this season. But then opening up against Wyoming, where your running game was non-existent, you lose that one in overtime, which, okay, good job, good effort. But then you have Oregon, a game that maybe, after watching the Colorado game, shouldn't have been as close as it was. But we kept it within 8 points, kept it with a possession. We had the winning drive in hand before we threw a pick six, of course. But, not utilizing the run game very much. So you lose that one. Tarleton State's a wash. It's, that's just an easy one for anybody. But then the most recent being West Virginia, where you have an abandoning of the run game in the first half and you lose your quarterback in the first half, which that's a problem. Yeah, it's just been this questionable offensive play calling, and the coaching staff has received pretty deserved amount of heat in the interviews on social media, because it seemed like everybody else in America that was repping a double T knew that if you are lined up on your opponent's 11-yard line and you have a chance to tie up the game and maybe even win it if you chance a 2-point conversion, but you decide not to give the guy who's averaging 7 yards on the night on the ground a chance, you just decide to throw it 4 times and turnover on downs and you lose. There's just a lot of they seem very immature mistakes for an offensive coordinator to the Division I level. I think that's fair to say. And so that feels like an easy thing to fix. And Kitley has addressed like, hey, we're going to feed Taj Brooks, our running back, this week. Of course, they're going to say whatever they have to say. Does it actually play out? I don't know. So the terminal question, it's like one of those that it kind of evolves for me. Like if we're not going to adjust the way that we're doing our offense, like he's trying to play it like he's still at Western Kentucky, but these are totally different teams. This is a totally different environment. The game is similar, but you have to adjust. And the inability to adjust in game for me kind of hints at a terminal illness for this game, for this season, that, if we're not going to run the ball with one of our best running backs we've had in some time, we're just not going to win games. And so kind of puts a bleak outlook on not only this game, but of course the games just get harder as we go on. So it pretty much starts at the top.
Yeah. And, you mentioned this injury, but for the second time in a row in this head-to-head series, the Cougs, the Red Raiders are going to be missing your starting quarterback, right? Tyler Shuck, due to injury. What are some differences that, Cougar fans can expect to see on Saturday with Morton running the Red Raider offense instead of Shuck?
That's a really good question. I will give you a little bit of spicy information that really isn't out there right now. But Baron Morton fell on his shoulder, or was tackled onto his throwing shoulder last game, and he may have sprained his AC joint. And I don't know if you guys have ever sprained your AC joint. I have. It's really hard to just put on a t-shirt for like a week after that. So to have somebody come out and play a football game, I don't know what they're going to do with Morton in regards to differing from Shuck. They didn't really change the game plan between the two. And it was Albert and I, my co-host, we believe that Morton's the best backup in the country. He came into last game against West Virginia and he was throwing ducks. But then when he started getting to his kind of rhythm there, we felt like we really had a good chance at the end. Of course, you were using the run game to open up the passing and everything felt good and fluid. But there's still a big learning curve. The kid's he's only a sophomore. He doesn't have a ton of experience under his belt. And with Zach Kitley at the helm, I think we're still really trying to figure out our offensive identity. The thing that you will see a lot more of if Morton is healthy and rearing to go is that Morton is really not afraid to go, like to run. If he feels like there's no options, he's not a throwaway first kind of quarterback. And rightfully so. He's a lot more zippy. He's a lot more athletic than Tyler Shuck was. Tyler Shuck was just the veteran, tall, you wanted him to be the captain of this team and to do the small things right and kind of lead this team to victory. And he struggled with that for a number of reasons, I'm certain. But Barron is just the guy who's been, everybody loves the second string quarterback. So, but he's certainly the guy who last season, had an electric start when he started against Oklahoma State. And, everybody's question is kind of like if Quinn Ewers never got hurt against Alabama, but for us, it was, if Morton didn't injure his ankle against Oklahoma State, we might have taken that game and ended the season with 9 wins, But Morton just brings a lot more energy and a lot more zip on the ball. He's a lot riskier too. He's going to try to make his name for sure. This is a guy who grew up a Texas Tech fan, which from youth to adulthood, not a lot of people who grow up Texas Tech fans.
So what's the matchup, whether that's individuals or position groups between these two teams, that you think will be the most important for the Red Raiders to get right to avoid the upset on Saturday?
Oh my goodness. It's offensive line play. Our offensive line this season was supposed to be markedly improved, but has suffered a little bit. And I think part of that is there was this hilarious metric that came out from an unknown, who cares about him, Twitter source, but I thought it was really funny. it was like quarterbacks with the most self-imposed something. And I'm like, how do you even measure that?
Quantify that? Yeah.
Yeah. How do you quantify self-imposed like inaccuracy or whatever it was? But then you watch the game and you're like, oh shit. Yeah. Well, I guess he does he kind of does that. He's got a clear pocket, but he's rolling out. So I think the offensive line has had a really hard time all season figuring out. There just seems to be a lack of cohesiveness. And in that, you can kind of overplay or over-adjust, and blitz packages can be a lot more effective against you. I think that the offensive line's ability to just play safe and effective offensive line play, which, God, that feels like a really difficult thing to ask for as a Texas Tech fan for the past 15 years. But the offensive line is going to be the critical piece of this game outside of like offensive coordination. Like what are we even running? It's going to be like, man, is the offensive line going to be able to pick up their assignments? Are they going to be able to create gaps whenever we are actually calling run plays? There's just been a lot of miscommunication, a lot of issues that are just like, if you're watching quarterback play and the fact that Tyler Shuck is sailing, curl routes way into the, stadium, you miss the small, dang, but like if he would have held that ball a second longer, he was going to get demolished because there's guys on him every play. So, man, it's just going to start up at the front for offensive line on offense. And then defensively, I think something that Texas Tech has been notoriously bad for, and I'll say it until they prove me wrong and bury me 6 feet under, it's just pass defense. We've gotten better, but when better than 131st out of 131st teams, 125 is better, but it's still garbage. So yeah. I think we're still trying to figure out how to play good defense without giving up really simple penalties. I mean, that killed us against West Virginia. We kept West Virginia in the game because, defensive backs weren't turning around to look for the ball. Small stuff like that from your veteran guys. You can't have it.
All right. So, when we logged in to do this, Sam called you a top 1% of Donovan Smith fans. So since you are such a big Donovan Smith fan from his time at Tech, sell me on Donovan Smith as somebody who's liked some of the things he's done and hasn't liked some of the things he's done. Sell me on him being capable of leading UH into these first 2 years of Big 12 play.
Man, I will clarify. I'm a really big fan of his family. His dad and I are pretty cool. I love the environment that he's around. I think he's a really great kid. And the way that he approached Coach McGuire to say like, hey, I'm gonna need a transfer at the end of last year. I don't know. I have a lot of respect for kids who hold themselves the way Donovan Smith holds themselves, to a higher standard, but not in like a boisterous way, but like I think I'm more, I think I am more than just a wildcat package guy. I think I'm more than just the trick gadget dude. And I want to go get that. And, he transfers and he becomes a starting quarterback. And no matter where that is, like, that's not easy to come in and just win out. And so I really admire that about Donovan Smith's character. When it comes to his play, this guy is built like a tank. Texas Tech is notorious for, and we've had a couple accounts kind of tweet and retweet this. It's all over if you go searching through a cactus emoji. But Texas Tech has had the most seasons where we have featured 3 quarterbacks since like 2011. There's been like 4 or 5 seasons where we have featured 3 quarterbacks because we can't keep somebody healthy. Offensive line play. There it is. Offensive line play. Donovan Smith doesn't really care. I don't think he really took that into account. When he ran, he would bowl dudes over. When he would get in the zone, it would look like, a young guy, but when he got in the zone, night and day, like that Houston game last year, when Donovan was feeling himself, and I know it hurts, but now it's kind of a weird, like, all right, now we're doing this weird flippy flop. Maybe he'll do it again. Maybe he'll do it against Tech. And then in Texas, when he leads us over Texas, which was a monumental victory for this program and for Coach McGuire in his first year, that kind of Donovan Smith that he can truly like tap into, the one that refuses to let other people tell him what position he should play, refuses other people to tell him that he can't do something. Like, he's just a dog. Like, he's got such a good why as an athlete and such a good drive to make that happen. Me as like armchair quarterback, and as somebody who played in this program way back in the terror days of Tuberville, like, that's the guy you want to fight for. Like, that's the guy you want taking snaps. You want the guy who's going to be in it till the end. Like, he's not going to give up until that last whistle blows. The technical stuff, he's not a terrible passer. He's not a terrible runner. Like, these are things that as young quarterbacks who didn't get a ton of attention, didn't go to a ton of academies, didn't do all these things, like, they adjust, and they get a good quarterback and coach in front of them, and they can turn into incredible people. I mean, look at what happened to, Cam Newton started at Blinn, right? Physique aside, you don't start at Blinn if you're terrible, or if you're great, but you can become great. And I think that for me, what made me such a fan of Donovan Smith from the beginning is that just his desire to become great and his coachability to become great. And so, I really hate that we let him go, number one, because he never seemed to get hurt. Number two, just the physique and the willingness to win. Like, for me, like, that's the kind of quarterback that I want at the end of the day. It may be a tough start. It may be a rough, like, getting to know a new system, getting to get chemistry with new guys you've never played with before. Like, you don't just like pop in and become a world star quarterback in one season. Like, sometimes these things take time. And if he, if you guys gut it out with Smith and he continues to commit to the program and the program commits to him, I've got no doubt that he would be above average, like a top half of the conference quarterback for you guys in those next coming years. Because that's kind of the athlete and character that he's got. Like, he doesn't want anything less for himself or his program.
So who are the players in this Red Raider team, either side of the ball, that someone doing kind of a surface level preview of the team, might be overlooking, who you think will have a big impact on Saturday's game?
Oh my goodness. Somebody I think Red Raider fans have been overlooking is our freshman linebacker, Ben Roberts. You may have seen the name by now. If you look through the stat sheet in the past couple of games, this guy came out of nowhere. His first start was against Oregon, and he put up like 12 tackles and got a sack. I mean, as your first, I cannot imagine your first like start as a freshman coming out because one of the linebackers got injured. It's like, hey kid, go make a difference. And you're playing against a team now that's like, oh, Heisman candidate Bo Nix, like, oh, like this team, like they may go for the college football playoff, and you have one of the best. You have one of the best performance. You have the best defensive performance of the night. Like, that's excellence. Like, that is a really good player, and it wasn't a one-off because he did it against West Virginia too. When we were having a hard time, Ben Roberts was still balling out. So, and we love, and we joke on our podcast, we love a white linebacker to like make this full circular, like, used to be the iconic American dream boy was like the white linebacker, and we've kind of gotten away from that. Well, Ben Roberts is right there, the classic American.
Back to Zach Thomas.
Back to the Zach Thomas days, man. Yep. Back to the Zach Thomas days. So the full Titans thing. So yeah, man, we really hype on Ben Roberts right now. He's playing excellent. On the offensive side of the ball, boy, that's hard to say. You're not overlooking anybody. There's nobody there right now. There's nobody making a difference. I can't sugarcoat it. We're so bad on offense. And it sucks because we have so many weapons on offense. Like, these are guys who they can all make a difference. I mean, we had to drop some serious money to keep some of our athletes here who were thinking about going to Oklahoma, who were thinking about transferring away. And some of those guys really just haven't panned out this season, and sucks because you're like, okay, well, that seemed like a waste of money and effort. And so, I hope that we can kind of get it on the board here in this game, at least get some offensive production I can be proud of. But there's really nobody on the offense outside, in the back. Taj Brooks is our MVP, man.
Right.
If he's getting the ball, we have a really good chance to win. If he's not, we do not.
Right. All right. So let's say, for the sake of this question, Texas Tech wins the game on Saturday. What does that win generally look like? And from your part of the world, what are the storylines or narratives that are coming out of the game, along with you guys and, the rest of Cactus Twitter, I guess, Cactus emoji Twitter?
You're saying, should we win? How do we react?
Like, if you win, what does that win look like? And what's going to be the narrative that comes out of it?
Well, the two main storylines I'm paying attention to are, one, is Baron Morton playing the whole time? And if he does, then how is he looking, right? How is he playing against a team, another Big 12 team? How is he performing now that he's kind of like the heir to be QB1? Tyler Shugg is out. broke his fibula in a horrifying way. So Aaron Morton will be that guy the rest of the season for sure, barring any injury, which seems to happen anyways. And then how is Zach Kittley and Coach McGuire? So Coach McGuire, head coach, Zach Kittley, offensive coordinator, Tim DeRuyter, defensive coordinator. The most consistent of those, like the most consistent part of our program right now is our defense. And it's no doubt because it's our most experienced coach. Tim DeRuyter has spent a lot of time at Division I. He's coached at schools like Oregon, and he's developed his defensive identity over time. Coach McGuire is in his second year as a Division I head coach. You know, Zach Kittley is like, I mean, from Western Kentucky to Texas Tech is kind of a jump, both in offensive power that you have, recruiting ability, as well as just the conference around you, right? You can't just hang 50 on everybody and call it a day. So I am just desperate to know what they are going to do in the wake of these first 4 games where we all were thinking, man, 3-1, no doubt. Like that Oregon game, maybe you lose that one, but 3-1 for sure. Now we're freaking 1-3. And there are serious conversations that need to be had. And the main one for Red Raider fans right now is like, is Zach Kittley capable of coaching this Texas Tech offense? An offense that has always been known to be like, you know, at least top 40 in the nation. Like we like to score, we like to put up points. What about the Patrick Mahomes days where we can score 60 and still lose? Like we were setting records in the worst ways. We have seemed to have gotten away from our identity offensively. So if we win against Houston, we're going to be asking a lot of work. We're going to be doing a postmortem on how did we win and what do we do to continue that? And I guarantee you, if we win, we will have run the ball some amount of times, more than 10 times. We would have run the ball.
So we kind of started out big picture. I figure we close here with a big picture question. How much of the frustration about the start of this season do you think has translated to bigger questions about Joey McGuire? Obviously, we're not talking about like hot seats or anything like that in year 2, especially the year 1 he had, but how much of that is just frustration at the OC and maybe just offensive pieces not coming together, and how much of that is really translating into doubt about whether this coach has the long-term goods to get Texas Tech back to at least like Mike Leach era success?
Yeah. And let me, no bones about it. Mike Leach era of success is still pretty average. He had like a couple of really good seasons, but it's average across the board. And so I think that's a delusion that Texas Tech fans really have to address, is that Mike Leach really didn't do that much. He did a lot, and we had a lot of really cool we had a lot of good things that happened within the Mike Leach era, but it's not some kind of like iconic. His character was almost more iconic than the seasons, right? So for me, it goes into I'm kind of working backwards in this, and we started doing this in the in the recap. Is like I'm looking at the quarterback, then I'm looking at the offensive coordinator, then I'm looking at the head coach, right? And so I don't think that any serious fan of Texas Tech is looking at Coach McGuire and saying, we were wrong about you, you're not the guy, or like I'm really doubting your ability. Because our policy on the Tortillas and Takes podcast is that you get 3 years, right? You get your first year to just get your feet wet, figure out what the culture is about, kind of set your precedent. You get the second year to start, feeling out your guys, your transfers, getting your system in place and making sure everybody's on the same page. That third year is when you really should be humming, because your recruiting classes are coming in and, you've got veterans on your squad. You kind of got it figured out. With McGuire in his second year, we kind of caught lightning in the bottle the first year. You had a lot of games where you won 1-possession games last season. That's a huge win for us, because we in the past we would not get near those 1-possession games. So the fact that we were winning them, that's huge for us. This year we're losing 1-possession games, right? 35-33 Wyoming, 38-30 Oregon, 20-13 West Virginia. We lost 3 1-possession games. And so there's metrics there that would say, it can't happen all season. So you kind of hold on to that for dear life. But there's also the reality that, Coach McGuire is still coaching up some of the guys that were under the Matt Wells era, these recruiting classes that were like in the 60s. And that's part of the offensive line issues, is that we're trying to coach up guys who are kind of at the lower end of the poll. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, But the guys that McGuire is bringing in, the fact that he's been able to corral these top 30 recruiting classes in his first 2 years, and he's like bringing in 5 stars, God, like that's something that we haven't seen in some time, being able to recruit these 5 stars at Texas Tech. Coach McGuire is safe. Right now it's Zach Kittley. An offensive coordinator is replaceable. There are plenty of offensive coordinators out there doing really good things at smaller programs, or really good things at really big programs. We want to get a change, whatever it is. That there's no limit. Like there's no limit to how many offensive coordinators you can go spooling around for. So right now, all the pressure is actually on Zach Kittley. Like, what are you going to do with this Texas Tech offense that you have talked about being the fastest Texas Tech offense? We're going to work really hard. We're going to keep a balanced offense. We're going to, use what we have. His quotes was, a presser, somebody asked him, are you going to just kind of go towards the air raid, or are you going to utilize our running backs because we got good running backs? And he said, we'll use what we have to play the game as efficiently as possible. And what he hasn't done this season is he's not used what he has. And so the question is just fully on Zach Kittley right now. Coach McGuire is certainly taking some heat about in-game management. And what I really think that means is that not reining in Kittley, right? Not saying like, hey, we need to do this. He's a great guy. He's an excellent coach. He's an even better human being, but there comes a time to be assertive. And so I think Coach McGuire is learning what that means to be the assertive head coach.
So Jeramey, great as always. Tell the folks where they can find you and Tortillas and Takes on the World Wide Web.
Oh, goodness. You can find us on Twitter at Tortillas, the letter N, Takes, because the ampersand doesn't exist. So Tortillas and Takes. We, of course, are on the Sports Social Network. We are always with our best friends, the 1012 Network. Yeah, you can just find us on Twitter. That's where we like to hang out and do our thing.
You want to just go ahead and take it back out of it? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So appreciate you guys doing the work on that interview. Disappointed I didn't get to join, but glad that we were able to get him on here to the pod. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's not all negative, I guess, but it's a lot of negative. A lot of teams in the Big 12 have had some fairly nightmarish starts to their season, but maybe none more so than the Texas Tech Red Raiders. With all the preseason hype they had, they're now 1-3 without an FBS win. They got Tyler Shuck out for the year. I mean, it could be better. And even when we were saying before the season, like, hey, losing the NFL guys on defense, trying to make all these changes, trying to deal with all this, expectations, the expectation that you do something much greater than you've done the last several years. That's a lot to deal with, but Texas Tech is kind of falling apart spectacularly.
Yeah. I was
just
going to say, like, as Jeramey talked about with us, this is a Red Raider season that hasn't lived up to probably the loftiest preseason expectations that programs had since their awesome 2008 season. Mike Leach's second to last year there. And I don't think we need to retcon those preseason expectations. This was one of the better Big 12 teams by the end of last season. They returned a lot from that team. And some part of me is still convinced this is like a lower end of the top half Big 12 team, because going to Wyoming in week 1 is really hard. Hosting what looks like a top 10 or 15 Oregon team is a really tough start to the season as well. But I mean, you can't lie. Some of the things that we've seen in the early season from this Red Raider team, I think should have anyone questioning the stock they bought in this team like I did. I mean, this was an offense even before Tyler Shuck got hurt that I don't think was hitting all of its potential. And Jeramey, I think, said that a lot when we talked to him. Pass protection, which was a big problem for the Red Raiders last year, is a big problem for them this year, allowing multiple sacks in each of their 4 games. But again, this was also an offense that generated 30 points and well over 400 yards against a really good Oregon team who has a defensive-minded head coach themselves. So this is still, even with its inconsistencies, a much better offense than any of the ones we've seen outside of TCU in the current season. I'm not wildly confident this Cougar defense can, even against Baron Morton, the backup, shut this offense down. And I think the big reason why is Taj Brooks. He's been so effective when they decide to give him the ball, and that hasn't always been, I think, as consistent as Red Raider fans want, but I haven't seen enough from this Cougar team that they can consistently shut down a veteran bell cow back like Brooks. That's my big concern here from at least a Cougar defense versus Texas Tech offense, even though it really sounds like Red Raider fans, Jeramey very much included, are very disappointed with what their offense has been in the current season.
Yeah, that was my big takeaway from the interview with Jeramey as well, is like Dustin said, it's a very tough way for them to start their season, right? They had these lofty expectations that they were going to compete for the Big 12 championship. And I saw people getting really excited that they were going to make the New Year's Six bowl games. And it's just not working out for them. And I think this is a game where the Cougars, if this is another one where after the Sam Houston State game, if the offense can come out and perform like it did, and the defense can come out and perform like it did, and like Jeramey said, their backup is even nursing a little bit of an injury right now. Can U of H come out and take advantage on a backup, possibly even third string quarterback who might make some decisions with a secondary that has really been able to create turnovers? Can they still do that? Can they do that against a third string quarterback? If we want to win this game, we're going to have to do that. So I think that's kind of something on my end that I would watch is who's playing quarterback for him, and can you force that young quarterback, that inexperienced quarterback, to make throws that he doesn't want to do? It requires pressure, but our defense has done a great job creating turnovers. And I think if we can do that, we got a really good chance at winning this game.
Yeah, seeing how much Morton struggled against West Virginia, and then also hearing how banged up it sounds like that he is, the thing that came to mind right away is like, oh dang, if Donovan Smith hadn't transferred out, he'd be starting against us on Saturday.
Yep.
That seems pretty clear. So, we can have some positives and some negatives certainly about how Donovan Smith has played for U of H this year, but I'm willing to bet anyone at Texas Tech would be very happy to take him back right about now. So,
yeah.
For Houston coming into this game, like you said, and whether it's Morton or somebody else, you got to stop the run game as well. And that is, like Sam said, I think the thing that concerns me a lot more. But for Houston, you're going on the road to face a team that just always seems to have your number. They've beaten you 5 times in a row. They've beaten you each of the past 2 seasons. First in a game that you were up by 2 scores at halftime, then in a game that you took the lead inside the final minute of regulation and couldn't close it out. And you're facing them when they don't have a ton to be confident about because they don't have an FBS win. They just lost to West Virginia. They maybe don't know if they have a healthy quarterback or not. Everything seems to be going against them. You've got a quarterback in Donovan Smith, who I imagine will be fired up to go play in his old stadium, against his old team. I don't know. This is one of those, as much as Sam Houston, we go, okay, this is a winnable game, and we're glad Houston played well, but it's not really gonna, I don't think it's going to significantly change the narrative of your season. I don't know how much confidence that really, it gives your players more confidence than losing the game against Sam Houston, but I don't know how much that makes you go really inspires the belief that this, team is going to turn things around. I don't know. I think Tech looks like a very winnable game that would actually do a lot for Houston's psyche, would do a lot for the fans. It gets you to 1-1. All of a sudden, if Houston's 1-1 in Big 12 play a week from now, with some of the very beatable teams that we talked about remaining on their schedule, again, I don't know that I would completely change my tune of being pretty confident that I want to see a coaching change at the end of the year, but all of a sudden you go, you know what, we have a lot to play for this year. Whereas, by the other token, maybe we come back and we lose by 14 points, and we're like, Jesus, even with everything going against Tech, right. We still couldn't beat these guys.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess it's time to maybe we're not very good. So it feels like just a lot going into this game for Houston, and maybe more, as much as maybe a couple of weeks ago, where you would have thought seeing this is kind of like, oh, great, but I don't know. I'm feeling weirdly more confident and excited, and what the potential for this game is than maybe I would have expected.
Yeah, I'm not saying Nelson Caesar and David Uebu have to reenact Derek Parrish's 4-sack game on Saturday, but if Baron Morton has a lot of time to throw, if he can get some confidence early in front of this home crowd, it might be a long game, fellas. And I think so much of this game's outcome is going to be determined by whether or not you can get in Morton's head early. And this hasn't been exactly the best Cougar defense against the opening drive script. I mean, Rice, TCU, and Sam Houston, your last 3 opponents, all scored fairly easily on their opening possessions, respectively. And also on the other side of the ball, I'm curious, after this, I think surprisingly good week running the football, you're going to now go against a Tech front that has a couple real veteran guys in Jalen Hutchins and Tony Bradford Jr. You're going to get challenged in a way that maybe Sam Houston couldn't do last week, all respect to the Cats of the K. But, and I'm not saying the Cougars need to rush for 200 yards in this one, but if this team can run the ball somewhere near 4 to 5 yards a carry on Saturday in Lubbock, I'm starting to feel pretty good about the rest of the season. I'm starting to feel pretty good that, hey, we might have a decent running attack here for the first time, probably since the year before Daniel Holgerson got here. Curious to see also how much of Tony Mathis Jr. we see after he's missed the last 2 seasons as well. I mean, I'm not forgetting the bad things we saw in the losses to Rice and TCU, but like you said, Dustin, on paper, this seems like a really good time to be facing Texas Tech. I'm sure there's going to be a good crowd in Lubbock, and I'm sure the team is fired up to finally be playing a FBS opponent that's somewhat winnable at home, but the mood's definitely deflated around that program. It's not the same place we went last year where you're still having the first year, joy of Joey McGuire being there. I still think there's belief long-term in him there, but I don't know, man. Having lived through the last 5 head-to-heads against the Red Raiders since that amazing, magical 2009 win at Robertson Stadium, I'm not going to go on record predicting a Cougar win here, but yeah, this feels a lot more winnable than it did when we kind of looked ahead in the preseason, even before our expectations got kind of deflated by the loss to Rice and the just non-competitiveness against TCU in the opener.
Yeah, I don't have anything too much more to add than this game does look winnable, and this is a game where you expect Houston. This is one of those games where we expect to be competitive. If we don't get a win, but we look good in it, you're okay with it. As crazy as that sounds, you want the win, obviously, but if we can show, like Sam said, we can show that we run the ball well and we do the things right. The offense looks like it did last week, but the defense obviously just isn't going to hold them to 7. Maybe you get a couple of bad luck plays where it bounces off a guy's hand or something like that, or one strip sack and it gets taken back, anything like that. Those plays that you can help but you can't help kind of deal. But you lose this game. If you get blown out, you're worried and you're still calling for Dana to be fired. But you win this game, and like you said, Dustin, you kind of you might change your expectations for the season a little bit, get a little bit more optimistic about it. But if I've said all year that I just want to look competitive in these games and not get blown out. This one feels like one where you absolutely have to be competitive. You cannot get blown out of this game, but if you lose a close game, I'm not going to be too upset about it.
Yeah, I think this is a game where, just kind of final thought, it's just, if we lose, but we look like we're more or less playing them reasonably close in the trenches on both sides, cumulatively, I think I'm relatively okay with it. I'm not going to feel great, but I'll be relatively okay with it. If we lose, and even if it's only by like 7 or 10, but it's kind of like the first half against TCU where it's like, okay, we're kind of keeping this close, but like, yeah, they are killing us in the trenches. Like,
yeah,
I don't think this is the best team overall, offensive and defensive line, that we're going to see the rest of the year by any stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's one where you really want to keep that momentum going of Parker Jenkins running well and getting a decent, hole to run in front of. And you want to continue the trend of Texas Tech having a really difficult time protecting their quarterbacks, for sure.
I was going to say, yep. It's nice to be the team with less pressure on them. Like, obviously, the same Houston Rice game, you go into those ones as big favorites. UTSA, toss up, but again, you don't want to lose a second time to UTSA at your own stadium. And obviously TCU, you weren't the favorite, but I mean, the pressure of the first ever Big 12 game. I mean, the staff can be in there, go into that locker room and say, no one expects you to win. Like these loser podcast guys are like, think you barely have a chance to keep it competitive. Things like that. Texas Tech is the program with this 1-3 start and desperately not wanting to go 1-4 to start their most hyped season in a decade and some change. So I like that. I like that the Cougs can go in this game and the pressure is really more on your opponent.
Absolutely.
All right. So looking at the Big 12 week to come, it starts on Friday night. We got some Friday night lights when Cincinnati will be at BYU, a game that has the Bearcats as a 1.5 point favorite right now. Really interesting game. I agree with Vegas having this one pretty close to a toss up. Both teams smarting somewhat after last week. Both teams still looking for their first Big 12 win of the year, or ever, I should say. Both teams capable of doing some things offensively, but very far from a finished, polished product. So I don't know, Sam, you're the BYU expert here, but this feels like there's a very high chaos factor in this one.
Yeah, I think I like BYU to win this, though, just because it's a night game on a short week in Provo. They're going to have a really good crowd out there. I think and this isn't like biased towards the team. Like, all right, I think if this game was in Cincinnati, I would like the reverse result there. Like, I don't think the BYU offense is a finished article. I don't think their defense certainly is, but I just think they have a little bit more on both sides of the ball. Keaton Slovis and the BYU offense isn't perfect, but it's shown an ability to do one phase of the game consistently well. I mean, you've seen the Bearcats run the ball some, but that passing offense with Emory Jones, I don't know if I see them winning a tough game in front of a big night crowd in Provo with just the inability to pass the ball we've seen from the Bearcats early this season.
And then getting to Saturday, no 11 o'clock Big 12 kickoffs on Saturday, but we got a couple 2:30 ones. The more watched one, I think, certainly going to be number 24 Kansas at number 3 UT Austin. The Jayhawks currently a 16.5-point underdog, so obviously it's kind of an obvious understatement to say this is a huge test for the Jayhawks, who enter the top 25 this week with a 4-0 record. And this is it's a still a work in progress defense for KU. I think that's going up against Quinn Ewers and this Longhorn offense. It's Jalen Daniels and this, very impressive Kansas offensive unit that's going up against the number 6 defense in the country per SP plus. And, like I mentioned, you have the history of last year. You started out 5-0, climbed from unranked to as high as number 19 in the poll. And then Kansas went 1-7 the rest of the way. So, I think there's one thing that all of a sudden you're 4-0, you're ranked, you're in the polls again. So I think there's a lot of pressure to especially if maybe you lose decisively against a really good, Longhorn team in Austin here. All of a sudden you go, oh, let's not do that thing that we did last year again. So hopefully, whatever the result here, I'd love to see the Jayhawks keep it close, obviously, and make a game of it, because it's never not funny when Kansas beats Texas in football, regardless of how good Kansas is. But if nothing else, I'd like to hope that the Jayhawks don't get too disheartened and don't have the same kind of backsliding that we saw in the second half of last year. And then also at 2:30, Bobby, again, that's all you. Baylor will be at UCF.
Talk about a game of two teams that have flipped their expectations on the year, right? Baylor coming in, thought they were going to be pretty good. UCF first year in the Big 12, and this game has this game has changed from what anyone thought it might be in the beginning of the season. If I would have told you at the beginning of the season that this game's taking place in Orlando and UCF would open as minus 11.5 point favorites, you would have gone, there's no way. What happened to Baylor? And what has happened to Baylor is their season. Baylor has just looked awful on both sides of the football this year. Their best game was against the Utah team that doesn't have a quarterback who could throw the football.
Is actively trying not to score points.
Number 10 in the country, Utah.
Yeah, no, good team, but absolutely trying to get just the minimum amount of points to win. I saw
exactly. So
that.
Yeah. So you see UCF's offense has just been on fire. And last week I said, is it time for us to kind of start taking UCF serious as a good team? And I think this game is going to prove yes. I could see UCF really coming in and just kind of beating Baylor and getting their first Big 12 win in this one. I think the 11.5 points is fair, right? And I honestly think the over under being at 55 is also I think it's a little low, because I feel like UCF's going to score a lot of points in this game versus Baylor. And Baylor has done nothing to prove that they could stop an offense, and they haven't done much of anything to show that they can create any offense of their own, even with UCF's backup quarterback, who looked pretty good last week. So.
And then at 6 o'clock, Iowa State will be a 20-point underdog in Norman against the Oklahoma Sooners. We saw the Sooners just keep Cincinnati out of the end zone for an entire game at Nippert Stadium. They've only given up 34 total points in 4 games this year. So obviously going to be really challenging for Becht and the Cyclone offense, especially because the Cyclones might not run for positive yards against Oklahoma in this game. Like, never mind, are they going to get to 100? Are they going to get to 0? Are they going to get to 10? Like, these are the real questions. So you figure, because this is probably going to be how finding out how far Becht can take you against an actually good defense. And it's obviously on the other side of the ball, a huge test for this Iowa State secondary, which is, I think, a pretty solid unit facing Dylan Gabriel, who put up some gaudy numbers against Tulsa and Arkansas State, but was much more human against SMU and Cincinnati. So that 20-point line, it's going to be hard for Iowa State to keep it within that if Gabriel's just kind of going off. But, I think that there's, Iowa State's been pretty, decent to above average defensively. So real curious to see if they're able to keep this one low scoring enough to maybe cover, even though I have a really hard time seeing them scoring enough points to pull off the upset here.
That's a rough welcome to Division I for Rocco Becht.
Yeah. And just a quick question about this game for you, Dustin. How much fun are you and your significant other going to have watching this game? I'm sure they will be having a good time. You probably will not be.
Well, they will be out of town.
You lucked out.
So I'm out of town. I think at a work event in town, I believe. So
Okay.
yeah, and I will be at our friend Bill's birthday party watching.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So
second mention. Shout out friend of the show, Bill.
Yeah, here we go,
not be in
Bill.
the same room. Hey, I went to the Sam Houston game with him, so apparently we should go to more games together. I think
There you go.
The moral of the story. And then finally at 7:00, a game of interest to both of you, West Virginia at TCU.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start with the TCU preview. Like I said, this TCU team really in their last week's review, they really look like they're starting to fire on all cylinders here. It really feels like their offense is really starting to figure out what they're trying to do, and Chandler Morris is just looking more and more comfortable playing quarterback. He's reduced those interceptions, and in my opinion, Sam can throw his thoughts out here. This is a game where I think the spread of -12 for TCU is pretty fair. West Virginia's got to go to Amon G. Carter, and I just don't see West Virginia really scoring enough to keep up with TCU.
Yeah, I think this is a really good test of how much improvement the West Virginia offense has truly made. I mean, if they can keep this game close for even most of the proceedings, I think that's definitely meeting expectations because, I mean, you alluded to it, Bobby, what would scare me the most if I was a Mountaineer fan would be, can that offense keep pace with what TCU and Chandler Morris are doing? Like, almost certainly not. Like, even with Garrett Green, their starting quarterback, I think that would have been a tall task. And from what sounds like from Neil Brown, it just doesn't sound like they want to get him out there until he's 100%. So it's going to be Nico Marchiol, a guy who threw for 72 yards against Texas Tech, trying to keep pace with one of the more explosive offenses in college football. If nothing else, you have the great style contrast of an up-tempo TCU offense against a West Virginia offense that is decidedly less tempo. We'll call it down tempo. We'll say it's down tempo. We'll make deliberate offense cool again. But yeah, I agree with Bobby. I think the Mountaineers are going to have a hard time keeping this one within double digits. And that's not even a knock on the season they're having. I just think TCU, we might need to recalibrate expectations on TCU. TCU might be really good. Like, I think I was angry we didn't score any touchdowns against what I thought was a bad defense. No, I mean, they might be a pretty good defense in and out of this world offense when it's all said and done this year. We don't know yet for sure, but
right.
I think that looks entirely reasonable after their last 2 weeks results.
Yep. All right. Sticking with the Big 12 theme and switching sports, Cougar Volleyball competed in their Big 12 opener this past week, playing the other Cougars of BYU out in Provo. The Cougars did take a 3-0 loss in that one to the top 10 BYU squad. And, I think to be fair, BYU, clearly the better team, deserved to win. They got the sweep. But I think it is worth noting that Houston was, for most of this match, pretty competitive with a really good team in their own building. The first set jumped out to a 9-4 lead before a 5-0 run by the other Cougars tied it up. The rest of the set nip-tucked the whole way. Houston actually got to set point at 24-23 before conceding 3 straight points, which gave the set to BYU. In the second set, Houston started out strong again, but unfortunately, that set saw the only extended stretch in the match where BYU just kind of took over. They actually went on a 13-0 run to make the second set not close. And then the third set, BYU actually started out strong, and it was Houston who rallied to get back in it and tie it up. But ultimately, BYU pulled back away late and won the third set 25-18. So, we talked about it in the preview, so this was going to be the toughest match on the regular season schedule. I think that proved correct. BYU is bigger and more physical than Houston. You could see it, but they were also on their A game. If you're going to have a chance to win a match like this, you need your opponent to not bring their A game. And that just was not in the cards in this one. They were unbelievable. You could even hear it from the announcers who were clearly local and had done a lot of matches this year, that this wasn't just another match for BYU. They were playing good, even by their own, top 10 in the country standards. So I think really a testament to Houston playing well in this one, despite getting swept, is the fact that, we didn't see them drop in the rankings. They stayed right at 20.
Yep.
Nobody passed them. They didn't pass anybody. And BYU actually went up from 10-9. They leapfrogged the Longhorns, even though the UT Austin swept 2 matches at Oklahoma. So I think that all is a testament to the voters realizing that this is actually a pretty respectable performance by the Cougs.
Yeah, as we were watching, the three of us were texting each other, and we were like, oh, this is like high quality volleyball on both sides, right? This showed, I think this really showed what this team needs to do to get to the next level, but that this team is capable of competing with very high high ranked teams in teams that are going to be, that everyone thinks are top 10, top 15 teams. This team is capable of playing with them. And this team is, I think last year we may have hit the Sweet 16 earlier than we expected. This team is a top 20 team in this country though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying this would have changed the match's outcome, but I'm so curious how different this one would have gone if the Cougars had taken that first set when they were at set point up 24-23. Maybe it changes nothing. We're back here talking about a 3-1 loss instead of a 3-0 loss. But I don't know, watching this one live, it felt like that finished a set one where the Cougs with a U won the final 3 points, kind of carried over, even though the Cougs had a promising start to the second set. If you want to really pick out one thing specifically, the hosts were absurd at the net, blocked shots that I frankly am not used to seeing this Cougar team get their shot spot against. It reminded me a lot of the Stanford team that we faced. Except I would say even better as a team. I think Stanford had slightly better athletes, but I think the way this BYU team just plays as a unit was just incredible. They didn't post super gaudy hitting numbers, but they were just so ruthlessly good defensively, whether that was at the net or digging out U of H's shots. And I think it was a good analog to like a Cougar men's basketball game where the Cougs shot fine, but not amazing, and just made life hell for their opponent on the defensive end. I think BYU definitely did the volleyball equivalent of that last week. And not as fun to be a fan on the team on the receiving end of that. But I mean, worth noting also that a slightly higher ranked Baylor team went to Provo on Saturday and lost 3-0, or even less competitive than U of H was. So this could just be one of the very best teams in the country on an on night, and not much you can do about that.
Yeah, and we definitely had a plan with our serves. I don't know if you guys noticed this either, but we were coming in pretty low, pretty fast, right? Just clearing the net, it seemed. And again, not a volleyball expert, so I could just be talking out of my what here, but it seemed we had a plan, and we had a lot of service errors because of it, but we also had a lot of service aces from that as well. So just something I kind of thought was interesting, that we clearly had a game plan versus BYU, and it was kind of working. You clean up some of those service aces in the first, or the service errors in the first set, and maybe you come away there. And like Sam says, this could be a different match if you win the first set.
So going forward, no rest for the already battle-tested. Houston will play its 8th and 9th consecutive matches away from the friendly confines of the Tortillas Center this weekend, when they will be at Kansas on Friday and Saturday. And oh yeah, after facing a top 10 team on the road, you get a top 20 team in number 19 Kansas in their own building. The Jayhawks 10-2 on the year, 1 spot ahead of Houston in the AVCA rankings. And unlike the Cougars, they did take care of business when they played Texas State in non-conference play, but I think that Cougar loss was kind of fluky and maybe wouldn't happen if they played again, especially if it was in Houston. And Kansas City did get a home match against the Bobcats there. And if you believe the top 25 voters, Houston's win over USC is better than any of Kansas's wins, with their best, really only, I think, quality win being against Marquette. And then also you saw the Jayhawks open Big 12 play by only splitting 2 matches in Lubbock against a Texas Tech team that's not expected to be among the best in the Big 12, had a 5-set loss to go with a 3-set win though. So, I think huge matchup here, obviously, especially with there being not 1, but 2 matches this weekend between these two teams. Really feels like it could go 1-1 or it could go 2-0 to either team. So, and Houston and Kansas could very well be jockeying for position in the Big 12 standings in the NCAA tournament seed line when it's all said and done. So really a lot on the line here, and just really, really excited to see what Houston does this weekend.
We'll just add IL Nadi and Reagan Cooper, both averaging over 3 kills per set. Got to watch them. Also, 2022 All Big 12 selection, Cameron Turner at setter as well. Reagan Burns has done a really nice job in her first Division I season at libero as well. I think this Cougar team is good enough to split, but I mean, it's a top 25 opponent at their place. Like it is no easy competition. This is not like facing Memphis in South Florida, where it's like, okay, how many sets do we drop over this weekend? It's 2 matches against a very, very good opponent.
Yep, and we knew that coming into the season, that this is what this conference slate was going to look like.
All right, I think that takes us to what's that sound? It's not Bobby's intro music. It's the Bobby's Golf Corner intro.
Hey, hello, welcome, friends. Hello, friends. Isn't that what Nance always says? So the Cougar women's golf team played in the Schooner Classic. I don't know why
the Schooner.
Schooner. That's right. Schooner. Sorry. Sue me. All right. Up in Norman, the Lady Cougs came away with a 4th place finish, finishing behind Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, and Purdue. They were one of 4 teams to finish under par had they not had an absolutely disastrous second round of 286, where everyone else was, how many teams were under par here? There's 7 teams were under par, and the Cougs were the probably 4th or 5th highest on that day. So really bad second round, but a really good first and third round. Get the Cougars at -2 and finish 4th place. A couple of notes here of teams that they finished ahead of and behind of. Wake Forest won this tournament at -29. The Cougars got 4th place at -2. Wake Forest, if you were curious if Wake Forest is any good, Wake Forest is the number 2 ranked team in the country according to Golf Stats, so they definitely played like that. Virginia Tech, 7 under, number 66. Purdue, number 48. And for some reference here, the Cougars are number 39. But finishing behind the Cougars was Florida State at number 9, Oklahoma State at number 16, Tulsa at number 37, North Texas at number 41, and the Iowa State Cyclones finished behind the Cougs, and they are ranked number 18 in the country. So you performed better than a lot of very, very good teams. You finished behind a couple that you are ranked ahead, but you are pretty close to them, with U of H being number 39, Purdue being number 48. That's not a huge, massive upset. And if you can clean up that second round, you really got a chance to finish second in this tournament. And that's really kind of what you're looking for in this. So Moa finished T7, so tied for 7th, another top 10 for her. And another interesting thing, every round was led by a different Cougar shooting the low score, so it's not just one player, kind of like our men's team. We had mentioned that last week, where our men's team really is dominated by one player. He kind of carries the team, and you want to see someone else. All 3 rounds, different Cougar led in scoring, so that's really positive to see. And if you haven't bought your stock in Cougar women's Cougar golf, I definitely highly recommend that you get that, you buy that stock now.
Only thing I would add, really impressive opening round for Malin Kim, a freshman we were super excited to see come in this program. Shooting at a 75 in day 2 kind of ruined any chances of competing close to the top of the board, but I mean, shot 69 on the final day, was even par for the whole event and among the top 20. So I think you'll take that from a freshman playing her second event ever in college. And like you said, Bobby, good to see a balance of Cougars, I think, golfing well up in Norman.
Absolutely, and it looks like Malin Kim had a couple of bad holes, and that kind of ruined and wrecked her round on the second round. So she went a double and a double, back-to-back double bogeys will get you into the 75 territory.
I was gonna say, it wasn't quite the ridiculously dominating first tournament we saw from the Cougs, but still against a really, really stacked field to finish 4th against a team with field with that many top 25, top 35 teams. I think really impressive by the Cougs, and shows why all 3 of us are really excited by this program right now. And
there's 4 other Big 12 teams, and you beat them by 5 strokes. So
after beating 3 or 4 Big 12 teams in the opening tournament too.
Yeah, this team, really I knock on wood, I'm knocking on this particle board desk here in my hotel room, but this team looks like it's going to at least be competitive, or should be competitive, at the Big 12 championships this year.
All right, so from a team that should be competitive at the Big 12 championships to a team that might not make the Big 12 championships, let's talk some Cougar soccer, who continued losing Big 12 matches this past week, opened the week by losing at home to UCF 1-0. Definitely a little disappointing, especially seeing yet another game where U of H got shut out by a decent team. But in a vacuum, I think 1 goal loss to a good team, not a terrible result. But what was much more disappointing was the second game of the homestand, wherein Houston hosted a Oklahoma Sooner team that is doesn't look like one of the better teams in the Big 12 this year, a team that Houston beat 2 years ago, a team that Houston conceded a late goal to draw against last year, a team with a brand new head coach this year. And the Cougs had a 1-0 lead after 70 plus minutes, thanks to an early wonder goal from Kirsten Kaiser, and then promptly conceded 2 late goals and lost 2-0. So at home against a team that you really have no reason to be afraid of, it just kind of felt like Houston went into a defensive shell too early and couldn't get back out. So yeah, I don't know. And the thing that I felt watching both of these matches and Houston just really struggling to score goals all of a sudden after scoring so many in non-conference was just that, it feels like such a high percentage of the goals we saw in non-conference were these like top of the box, outside of the box, really, really impressive goals. And like the one goal we've seen recently was exactly that. It was
Kaiser's goal. Yeah.
Kaiser from the top of the box, just with a really, really impressive goal. But what we just didn't see this team do is like create some maybe slightly easier ones, get some chances that are from actually like inside of the box every once in a while. And we've just seen a huge, lack of those opportunities. And I think that's why we've seen this team for the last handful of games now just to have a really, really hard time scoring goals. We've seen some, I think, teams that are a little bit better defensively aren't giving Houston that space that they need at the top of the box, trying to make them work for it. And the Cougs just haven't been able to really have an answer offensively, and now find themselves 3 losses in 3 matches in Big 12 play.
Yeah. Oklahoma was 0-3 on the road coming into this one, and to lose it from a winning position just really hurts. That was something you didn't want to see come back from last year, was this team struggles conceding late. I mean, last year you almost beat Memphis, a top 25 perennial power, perennial postseason team at their place, but out for conceding goals late. And this one, like, it's a much worse Oklahoma team. To not even get a draw out of that is very, very disappointing. I can look past the UCF one because you had roughly the same number of chances. They had 1 goal, and it's just like, okay, but that's probably a postseason team. Would have liked to get a draw out of it, but it doesn't dramatically change how I feel about the season. But I mean, this is one, if you wanted this team to be in the Big 12 championship, it needed to be a win, not even a draw. It needed to be a win. You need to stay out that 1-0 lead, and didn't do it. So kind of back to being very unsure if this team has any kind of postseason future for this year.
Yeah, we said it was going to be a problem coming into the year, is goals scored, and we played a relatively weak non-conference schedule, and I think it may have given us a little bit of false security there. And you got to put the ball in the back of the net. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, playing the non-conference schedule that we did certainly doesn't seem to have accomplished anything in terms of getting Houston ready to score against even Big 12 teams, which again, like, it's worth remembering. The Big 12, like, of all the sports that U of H sponsors, the sport that the Big 12 as a whole is the worst at is probably women's soccer.
Yeah, not that's a bad league, but it's not like a murderer's row league.
Yeah, I mean, there's just like
it's fine.
There's like 5 or 6 teams in the 100s of the RPI. Like right now, it's like it's not a great conference, and Houston is still struggling mightily. So, like I said, 3 losses in 3. It's only a 10-game non-conference schedule, so only 7 matches to go. I think at this point we can probably pretty comfortably rule out making the NCAA tournament, but with this loss, I think it's going to be an uphill sledding, only even to be one of the 10 teams that qualify for the Big 12 tournament. So, Houston's final 3 matches against TCU, UT Austin, and Baylor, all 3 of those teams look comfortably better than Houston. So your next 4 matches against 4 not that great opponents are going to be huge in terms of if you want to actually make even the conference tourney this year. And that starts this week, when Houston will be away to Iowa State on Thursday, and then home versus West Virginia on Sunday. The Cyclones, dead last, worst team in the Big 12 per this week's RPI, coming in at 189. Won their first 2 matches of the year. They have since, in their 9 matches, had 1 win, 1 draw, and 7 losses, including opening Big 12 play with losses to Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and Cincinnati. Both Houston and Iowa State have scored exactly 1 Big 12 goal in 3 matches, so this one may be a little bit on the lower scoring side. On the other hand, who knows? I'd love it if Iowa State passes far enough into like not good territory that Houston starts scoring again, because the Cougs didn't seem to have trouble scoring against genuinely bad teams, and I think Iowa State is one of those. Mountaineers a little bit more respectable, 118 in this week's RPI, but still only 3 wins in 11 matches this year, 1-2 record in Big 12 play, with the only win coming against the Cyclones. So a little bit better team, West Virginia, but Houston gets them at home, whereas they have to go up to Ames for Iowa State. So I don't know. Both 0-2 and 2-0 feel like they're in play this week. So I feel like a week from now we could be anywhere from kind of rebounding and hopeful about this program to ready to completely throw in the towel on the season.
Yep. Not much to add on what you just said. It's kind of one of those make or break weeks for you. You can either come out of this and go, okay, we still got a shot at making the Big 12 tournament, or we can come out and go, guys, this isn't good. So
there'd be some humor that historically one of the worst programs at U of H would be the first one to get the Big 12 win if they get the win in Ames on this week, before the Cougar football team or volleyball teams have a chance to play again.
It is more than a little bit annoying that we're this far in and still looking for any sport to go ahead and
remember when we started the year and we were like undefeated as a Big 12 program.
The universe is paying us back.
Yep.
Pride cometh before this. I don't remember. All right. That's going to be it for us. On our way out, as always, just going to say patreon.com/SH podcast. Going to let you to know you can get in contact with us, shpodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at SH podcast. I think that's going to be it for us. If you made it all the way to the end, you're an absolute rock star. And as always,
Go Coogs.